Right now, it actually takes longer to send money from Tokyo to Brazil than it did to fly a physical briefcase of cash across the world in the 1970s.
Which is, it's wild when you say it out loud.
It is. Like, you could literally handcuff a Pelican case of $100 bills to your wrist, get on a commercial flight, lay over in LA, land in Sao Paulo, clear customs, and hand over the physical cash faster than the global correspondent banking system can settle a digital wire transfer today.
Yeah, and while that transfer is just crawling through the plumbing, you have trillions of dollars that are basically trapped in dead accounts just to keep the whole global economy from grinding to a halt.
It's a stunning paradox, really. I mean, looking at it from a macro perspective.
Oh, absolutely. We have fiber optic cables transmitting high-frequency trading data across oceans in literally milliseconds. But the actual settlement layer for the world's capital, it still fundamentally operates on 50-year-old architectural logic.
Right. And that brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are looking way past the daily noise of the markets.
Yeah, all the distractions.
Exactly. The retail speculation, the meme coins, the fractional interest rate debates, that is all just surface-level turbulence. Today, we are focusing on a massive, silent rewiring of the global financial system that is happening right in front of us.
And we've got a really incredible stack of sources today to walk through.
We do. We're pulling from institutional network analyses, macroeconomic flow data, and legislative blueprints. So our mission today is to break down the architecture of the XRP Ledger, or the XRPL, the Incoming Clarity Act, and why the absolute apex players of global finance are adopting this highly specific technology.
Because we are witnessing what the data in our sources confirms as a 0-to-1 monopoly event.
A total paradigm shift.
Right. The legacy correspondent banking system isn't just getting like a software patch. It is being entirely bypassed by a frictionless, mathematically deterministic ledger. And because this shift is happening at the institutional and sovereign level, the average retail participant is almost completely blind to it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the mechanical failure of the current system first. Because you don't rip out the plumbing of global finance unless the pipes are actively bursting.
Yeah, you really don't.
So talk to me about the actual mechanics of SWIFT and correspondent banking. Why is it failing so catastrophically?
Well, to understand the failure, you have to look at the lack of a direct pipeline. Like, when a mid-sized bank in Japan needs to send capital to a supplier in Brazil, those two banks do not have a direct relationship.
They don't trust each other.
Exactly. They don't trust each other, and they don't hold each other's currency, so they have to use intermediaries, which we call correspondent banks. To facilitate these hops, the system relies on Nostro and Vostro accounts.
Okay, break down the actual capital mechanics of a Nostro account for me. Like, what does it demand of a bank's balance sheet?
Basically, it demands pre-funded, trapped capital. Nostro translates to ours, and Vostro translates to yours. So for that Japanese bank to ensure it can settle trades in Brazil, it literally has to partner with a larger correspondent bank and park a dormant pile of Brazilian real in an account in South America.
It just sits there.
It just sits there. It generates minimal yield. It is completely exposed to currency devaluation, and crucially, it cannot be deployed for lending or investment. Now, multiply that requirement by every currency pair. Yen to euro, dollar to baht, peso to pound.
Across every major financial institution on Earth.
Right. The inefficiency is staggering.
And the sources actually quantify this friction. We are looking at an estimated $120 billion a year bled out of the global economy just in friction, fees, and trapped capital costs.
Yeah, and that is just the financial cost. The operational cost is honestly even more alarming because these transactions have to hop through multiple disparate databases, right? Each one has its own batch processing times, its own compliance checks, local holidays.
Oh, right. A bank holiday in one country delays the whole chain.
Exactly. And because of all that friction, the system suffers a failure rate of 2 to 3%.
A 3% failure rate for global capital flows.
Yeah.
If cloud servers failed 3% of the time, the entire tech sector would collapse.
Completely.
But traditional finance has just accepted this as the cost of doing business. Now, the obvious question for anyone who has been following digital assets over the last decade is, well, why haven't the foundational cryptocurrencies solved this?
Right, the Bitcoin and Ethereum argument.
Yeah, we have Bitcoin, we have Ethereum. If the goal is a decentralized, borderless ledger, why do institutions need a completely different architecture? Why not just use what's already there?
Because legacy crypto fundamentally failed the institutional engineering test. It comes down to this core concept of settlement finality. Let's look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses a proof-of-work consensus mechanism, so you have miners competing computationally to validate blocks. But because multiple miners can solve a block at roughly the same time, the network occasionally forks.
Right, and then it has to reorganize itself to the longest chain.
Exactly. And this creates what is known as probabilistic finality.
Meaning you are never 100% certain the transaction is permanent the actual second it happens.
Correct. You have to wait for multiple subsequent blocks to be built on top of your transaction to be statistically confident that it won't be reversed. And in Bitcoin, that takes roughly 60 minutes.
Which is an eternity in high finance.
It really is. If you are a sovereign wealth fund or a tier 1 bank moving $5 billion, you cannot sit in a 60-minute window of probabilistic uncertainty while the asset's price is violently fluctuating. I mean, the counterparty risk is mathematically unacceptable.
Not to mention the energy consumption.
Yeah.
I mean, the sources know Bitcoin burns around 700 kilowatt hours per transaction.
Yeah, the ESG mandates make it impossible.
Right. Central banks operate under incredibly strict environmental, social, and governance mandates now. Adopting a network that consumes the energy of a small nation just to process a handful of transactions per second is functionally impossible for a central bank.
It's a total non-starter.
But wait, Ethereum shifted away from mining, right? They moved to proof of stake specifically to solve that energy crisis. So why isn't Ethereum the settlement layer for these institutions?
Well, proof of stake definitely solved the energy issue, but it didn't solve the scalability or the deterministic finality choke points that global commerce requires.
It's still too slow.
Yeah, Ethereum still takes between 5 to 13 minutes to achieve finality, and furthermore, it operates on a variable gas fee model.
Ah, right, the gas fees.
Yeah. When network demand spikes, say during a massive retail token launch or just a really busy trading day, the cost to execute a smart contract skyrockets. You cannot run a global clearinghouse processing quadrillions of dollars a year on a network that unpredictably hikes its fees and just chokes on throughput.
Which isolates the fundamental difference in the XRPL's origins. Because when cryptographers like David Schwartz, Arthur Brito, and Jed McCaleb built the XRP Ledger back in 2012, they weren't trying to build a new sovereign currency to overthrow the government.
No, not at all.
And they weren't building a decentralized casino for trading JPEGs.
Yeah.
They built an enterprise-grade infrastructure from day one.
And their intent dictated the architecture. They looked at the friction of global value transfer and realized that mining and variable fee markets were just the wrong tools for the job. So they designed a federated consensus mechanism.
Okay, stop there because that term gets thrown around a lot without any mechanical explanation. How exactly does a network reach consensus without miners competing for a reward?
Right. So in a federated consensus model, instead of miners competing, you have independent validators running the network software. And each validator maintains a unique node list, or a UNL.
A UNL.
Yeah. This is basically a list of other validators that they believe are honest and reliable. For a transaction to be permanently added to the ledger, a supermajority, which is typically 80%, of the validators on that overlapping network of lists must agree on the validity of the transaction.
But what incentivizes them to be honest if they aren't getting paid newly minted tokens? Because in proof of work, miners behave because they want that block reward.
That's a great question. The incentive is actually the utility of the network itself. The validators are run by universities, tech companies, financial institutions, and exchanges who actively rely on the ledger operating flawlessly.
Oh, I see. They need it to work for their own businesses.
Exactly. They don't need a token reward. The reliable millisecond settlement of their own daily operations is the reward. And because there is no computational arms race, the energy requirement drops to almost zero.
The metrics in our sources are pretty stark here. Settlement finality is absolute, not probabilistic, in 3 to 5 seconds. The network natively handles 1,500 transactions per second. The energy expenditure is 0.00005 kilowatt hours, which is like 99.99% less than proof of work.
It's mathematically deterministic. When that ledger closes every 3 to 5 seconds, the state of the network is immutable. There are no chain reorganizations, ever. That is the baseline institutional requirement.
So if Bitcoin is digital gold, heavy, slow, stored in the vault for macroeconomic hedging, XRP seems fundamentally different. It acts more like digital oil.
That is the perfect distinction. It really is. XRP was entirely pre-mined at inception.
Okay.
There is a fixed immutable supply of exactly 100 billion tokens.
Not a single fraction of a token will ever be created again.
Right. It isn't designed to be hoarded in a cold wallet waiting for a fiat price to pump. It is the raw utility lubricant of the ledger. It greases the wheels, moving value instantaneously across the network.
So we have the highway. It is lightning fast, practically free, and uses negligible energy. But a highway is totally useless if the cargo can't get on and off seamlessly. Global institutions operate in fiat currencies. They need a stable unit of account.
Which brings us to Ripple USD, or RLUSD.
Right, an enterprise-grade stablecoin. But, I mean, the crypto market is already flooded with stablecoins. Why would JP Morgan or the Bank of International Settlements care about this specific one?
They care deeply because of the regulatory architecture surrounding it. Institutions cannot and will not utilize a stablecoin that operates in some offshore algorithmic gray area.
Right, they need legal certainty.
Exactly. RLUSD operates under a New York State Department of Financial Services Limited Purpose Trust Company charter.
Okay, let's unpack that charter because that is notoriously difficult to get. What does holding a limited purpose trust charter actually mean mechanically for the asset?
It means the asset is bankruptcy remote. The fiat reserves backing the stablecoin, which are strictly U.S. dollars and short-term U.S. treasuries, are held in entirely segregated accounts.
So if the company goes under?
If the issuing company were to completely collapse tomorrow, the assets backing the stablecoin are legally insulated from creditors. Furthermore, it subjects the issuer to rigorous, constant audits by one of the strictest financial regulators on Earth. It provides an unimpeachable fiat foundation.
Okay, so we have a compliant fiat on-ramp. Yeah. An institution digitizes its dollars into RLUSD. Now they need to send value across borders. How does the ledger physically execute the swap from one currency to another without reverting back to the trapped capital of those Nostro Vostro accounts we talked about?
Right. This relies on the XRPL's native pathfinding algorithm and its built-in central limit order book, or the CLO.
The CLO.
Yeah. And this is a crucial distinction from other networks. The decentralized exchange on the XRPL isn't a third-party application or a separate protocol you have to connect a wallet to. The exchange is hard-coded into the base layer of the ledger itself.
Oh, wow. So every single account on the ledger has direct, instantaneous access to the global order book.
Exactly. Let's look at a concrete corporate supply chain scenario to make this real. Imagine a major aerospace manufacturer in France needs to purchase specialized turbine components from a supplier in South Korea.
Okay.
The French company holds euros, but the Korean supplier obviously demands payment in Korean won. In the legacy SWIFT system, this requires correspondent banks to lock up capital in both jurisdictions, charging high spread fees and taking days to clear.
And on the XRPL, what does that look like?
Well, the French company initiates the payment. The XRPL's native pathfinding algorithm instantly scans the entire global order book on the ledger. It looks for the absolute most capital-efficient route.
In milliseconds.
Right. It might find that the cheapest path is to swap euros for RLUSD, bridge that RLUSD into XRP, and instantly swap the XRP for Korean won on the other side.
And because settlement is 3 seconds, there is zero counterparty risk or currency volatility during the transfer.
None. The ledger executes the entire multi-hop sequence as a single atomic transaction.
What happens if the liquidity isn't there?
If the entire path cannot be executed at the requested price, the transaction simply fails upfront before any funds move. XRP acts as an agnostic universal bridge asset. Neither the French nor the Korean company ever had to hold XRP, and no bank had to warehouse dead capital in Seoul or Paris.
That is amazing. The capital efficiency that creates is almost unfathomable. If you eliminate the requirement for pre-funded foreign accounts, you are suddenly liberating trillions of dollars in stagnant global liquidity.
It changes everything.
Banks can take that capital, pull it out of dormant correspondent accounts, and actually deploy it into active yield-bearing investments. It restructures the balance sheet of the entire banking sector.
But as you pointed out earlier, superior technology does not automatically guarantee institutional adoption. The traditional financial system is heavily entrenched, and they are fiercely protective of their regulatory boundaries.
Right. A frictionless bridge is totally meaningless if the regulators make it illegal for a bank to cross it.
Which brings us to the regulatory capture strategy. Most of the cryptocurrency industry over the last decade adopted a distinctly combative posture toward regulators.
Yeah, moving offshore, fighting the SEC.
Exactly. They operated offshore, championed decentralization as a means to bypass government oversight, and just generally treated compliance as an afterthought. Ripple took the exact opposite approach.
They pursued a strategy of rigorous, almost Rockefeller-style vertical integration through compliance. They recognized early on that apex institutions would only adopt technology that was formally licensed and legally insulated.
Right. Let's run through the licenses detailed in the sources, because it really reads like a strategic map of global financial hubs.
Go for it.
They systematically acquired apex-level permissions. They secured a major payment institution license from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. They locked down virtual asset service provider registrations in Dubai, Ireland, and the United Kingdom.
That covers a massive portion of global capital.
Yeah, and they integrated deeply into the Japanese market through massive joint ventures with SBI Holdings. And perhaps most ambitiously, they have actively pursued a formal U.S. bank charter.
A digital asset technology firm working toward a chartered U.S. bank status is a huge paradigm shift. But all of these licenses are international or state level. The primary hurdle has always been federal U.S. law.
Oh, absolutely.
And the sources point to a specific legislative blueprint currently moving through the Senate Banking Committee, the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, or the Clarity Act. And looking at this isn't just a general framework. The language in this bill looks surgically designed to crown a winner.
The Clarity Act is the ultimate regulatory moat. On a macro level, it resolves the turf war between the SEC and the CFTC by formally dividing their oversight. But the structural genius of the bill lies in a new statutory classification it creates.
The network token.
Yes, the network token.
What exactly differentiates a network token from a standard security or corporate stock under this new legislation? Like, how does it bypass the Howey test?
A network token is defined as an asset that derives its intrinsic value from the operational utility of a distributed ledger. Things like facilitating payments, executing settlements, or providing network security.
So it's about utility, not equity.
Explicitly, it separates the asset's utility from the profitability of a centralized issuing corporation. Because the XRP Ledger operates autonomously, validating transactions via federated consensus, regardless of whether Ripple, the company, even exists, XRP perfectly aligns with this network token definition.
It detaches the asset from the Howey test entirely. But the real kill shot in this legislation is Section 105. Walk me through this grandfather clause because it's fascinating.
Section 105 contains an explicit grandfathering provision. It dictates that if a federal court has formally determined that a digital asset transaction does not constitute an investment contract or security prior to the enactment of the Clarity Act, that asset is permanently grandfathered into the most favorable non-security regulatory category.
I mean, looking at the landscape of digital assets, there is only one major top-tier asset that fought a multi-year, grueling federal lawsuit against the SEC and secured a definitive court ruling in 2023 stating it is not in itself a security.
Yep.
And that is XRP.
The wording of Section 105 surgically isolates XRP. When this legislation passes, it effectively pulls the ladder up behind them.
Wow.
Think about the hundreds of competing tokens that avoided regulatory scrutiny, operated through offshore shell companies, and focused entirely on retail speculation. Under the Clarity Act, they will suddenly face retroactive compliance audits or just outright regulatory eradication.
Because their institutional liquidity will just evaporate overnight. A U.S. national bank will not be legally permitted to interact with an unregistered, non-grandfathered token.
Exactly. It leaves XRP standing alone as the only legally viable, federally grandfathered, institutional-grade digital commodity engineered specifically for bank settlement.
That is an absolutely ruthless corporate strategy.
Yeah.
So we have the technological baseline, the 3-second fractions of a penny deterministic settlement. We have the legal architecture, the global licenses, and the Clarity Act moat.
Right.
But, theory and legal frameworks are one thing. Who is actually plugging into this system right now? Are the Apex players actually migrating?
The migration is happening, and it is being aggressively driven by a mandatory global data standard known as ISO 2022.
ISO 2022. It sounds like an incredibly dry piece of bureaucratic trivia, but the sources indicate it is essentially the new operating system for global money. What is it, and why does it force institutions toward modern ledger technology?
Well, the legacy Swift MT messaging system transmits data using highly constrained, flat text files. It is honestly like sending a basic SMS text message.
Very limited data.
Extremely limited. In the modern era of complex anti-money laundering screening, strict compliance protocols, and automated clearing, a flat text file simply cannot carry the necessary data payload. ISO 2022 is a new international messaging standard based on XML, extensible markup language.
So it's much richer.
It allows for incredibly rich, structured, and heavy data payloads to accompany every single financial transaction.
And the entire global banking system operates under a strict deadline to completely migrate their internal infrastructure to this new standard, right?
Yes. If a bank does not speak ISO 2022, it will effectively be cut off from the global financial system. Now, here's where the institutional adoption of XRPL becomes undeniable. Ripple was the very first distributed ledger technology company to join the ISO 2022 standards body.
Wow, the first one.
The very first. They didn't just observe the standard, they natively integrated the XRPL and their enterprise software directly into the ISO 2022 data architecture.
Hold on, let me make sure the mechanism here is clear for everyone listening. When a major Tier 1 bank spends hundreds of millions of dollars upgrading its internal mainframes to parse this new XML data standard, what does that mean for their compatibility with the XRP Ledger?
It means the friction of integration drops to near zero. Because the XRP Ledger natively processes and speaks the exact same ISO 2022 XML data structures, every bank that upgrades to the new SWIFT mandate is inherently upgrading its systems to be instantly interoperable with Ripple's infrastructure.
They don't have to build a bespoke translation layer.
Exactly. They are already speaking the exact same language.
And we are seeing this play out at the absolute highest levels of sovereign finance. The sources detail the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS. This is literally the central bank for central banks. And they are driving something called Project Agora.
Project Agora is a massive foundational initiative. The BIS is attempting to solve the ultimate macroeconomic puzzle, how to seamlessly integrate tokenized commercial bank deposits with wholesale central bank money on a unified programmable platform.
Because right now, commercial money and central bank money exist in entirely separate technological silos.
Precisely. Project Agora is building the bridge between the two, and Ripple's architecture is structurally positioned directly in the center of this cross-border tokenized settlement paradigm. But, it isn't just theory. Look at the UAE Central Bank and the Enbridge project.
Yeah, walk me through Enbridge. What is happening there?
The Enbridge project is historical. It was the first and largest real-value pilot of cross-border wholesale central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, involving multiple sovereign jurisdictions. Ripple deployed key liquidity integrations directly onto the XRPL to connect these sovereign-backed digital currencies.
So this wasn't a test network.
No, they provided the direct liquidity routing. This wasn't a closed sandbox test with monopoly money. This was real-world sovereign monetary policy operating autonomously over the XRP Ledger.
So central banks are utilizing it to move wholesale sovereign value. But what about traditional finance? Wall Street, the bond market, equities. How does a public blockchain integrate with the highly proprietary, heavily guarded ledgers of a bank like JP Morgan?
Right, that's the big question.
We have a concrete example in the sources, the ONDO Finance pilot.
The ONDO Finance transaction is basically the definitive blueprint for the convergence of TradFi and decentralized ledgers. ONDO is a massive issuer of tokenized real-world assets. They manage a tokenized short-term U.S. Treasury product known as OUSG, which is backed by BlackRock's massive BUIDL fund.
Okay, so we're talking about highly regulated, BlackRock-backed U.S. government debt living as a digital token.
Yes. ONDO deployed this asset natively onto the XRP Ledger. Now, trace the exact path of the transaction when an institutional investor wanted to redeem their treasuries for fiat currency. ONDO initiated the redemption of the OUSG fund directly on the XRPL.
Okay, the request originates on the public ledger. But how does it get to the bank securely?
The settlement instructions generated on the XRPL were instantaneously routed through MasterCard's multi-token network.
Oh, MasterCard acts as the bridge.
Exactly. MasterCard acted as the secure verification bridge. Those instructions were then fed directly via API into JP Morgan's proprietary permissioned blockchain platform known as Kinexys.
So the data moves from a public blockchain through a global payment processors network and directly into the internal private ledger of the world's largest bank.
Correct. And upon receiving those verified instructions on Kinexys, JP Morgan automatically executed the fiat settlement, delivering physical US dollars into Ripple's bank account in Singapore in real time.
That completely shatters the barrier between legacy finance and digital assets. I mean, in traditional equities, redeeming a treasury could take 2 to 3 business days to fully settle and clear.
Under this new architecture, institutional investors can mint, trade, and redeem U.S. treasuries 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, natively on the XRPL. Utilizing assets like RLUSD for instantaneous liquidity, the legacy delays of T+2 settlement are bypassed entirely. The asset and the payment settle simultaneously.
But, this raises a glaring architectural question. If JP Morgan has spent billions developing its own private blockchain like Kinexys, why do they need the public XRP ledger at all? Why wouldn't a consortium of megabanks just build one massive private ledger and lock everyone else out?
Because walled gardens fundamentally fail when it comes to global liquidity. A single private ledger cannot interact with the thousands of distinct financial jurisdictions, local payment rails, and central banks across the globe without exposing its internal data.
Oh, right. Data privacy.
Right. The future architecture of global finance is not a single monolithic ledger. It is a network of networks.
So institutions need an ironclad layer of privacy for their internal operations, but they need a neutral public utility layer to actually clear and settle trades across borders.
Exactly. The sources illustrate this dynamic perfectly with the Canton Network. The Canton Network is a massive, public permissioned blockchain. It is driven by the DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, which processes quadrillions of dollars in securities every year, alongside major banking institutions like Goldman Sachs.
So Canton is essentially the ultimate secure vault for Wall Street.
Canton is purpose-built to provide the zero-knowledge privacy controls required to tokenize massive real-world assets, like complex derivatives or syndicated loans. A bank cannot broadcast its trading strategies or internal asset allocations on a public ledger for its competitors to analyze.
Right, that would be corporate suicide.
So they tokenize and manage the asset internally on Canton.
But what happens when Goldman Sachs needs to settle a tokenized derivative trade with a counterparty in Tokyo who operates on a completely different network?
That is exactly where the walled garden breaks down. A tokenized asset stuck in a private vault cannot execute a cross-border settlement efficiently. Canton handles the internal issuance and privacy, but it fundamentally requires a frictionless, hyperliquid bridge to the outside world.
And that's the XRPL.
That is the exact role the XRPL plays. Canton handles the privacy, XRPL provides the instantaneous, universal clearing across distinct networks.
Mechanically, though, how does the XRPL serve as the supreme router for all these disparate networks without choking on the complexity? You have private bank chains, public chains, CBDCs, all trying to communicate state changes simultaneously.
The XRPL handles this through highly specific protocol amendments. Two are critical here. The first is XLS30, which embedded an automated market maker, or an AMM, directly into the ledger's core consensus mechanism.
I want to push back on that because AMMs exist everywhere in crypto. I mean, Uniswap operates billions in volume. Why does it matter that the XRPL integrated one directly into the ledger?
Because third-party AMMs built via smart contracts on top of a network suffer from fragmentation, front-running, and massive price slippage.
MEV bots.
Exactly. On networks like Ethereum, an institutional order can be exploited by maximum extractable value, or MEV bots that see the transaction pending and manipulate the price. By integrating the AMM natively into the XRPL's central limit order book, the protocol itself aggregates the liquidity.
So the AMM and the traditional order book are fused together.
Exactly. It creates a continuous auction mechanism. When an institution routes a massive payment through the XRPL, the protocol automatically executes against both the order book and the AMM simultaneously to guarantee the absolute optimal pricing and minimal slippage.
That's brilliant.
It optimizes yield for liquidity providers natively without the security risks of third-party smart contracts.
And what is the second protocol upgrade?
The XLS38 amendment. This upgrade, combined with the Axelar network's general message passing technology, enables absolute cross-chain interoperability.
Explain general message passing. How does a contract on one chain influence another?
Well, traditionally, to move value between blockchains, you had to use highly vulnerable bridges that locked up an asset on chain A and minted a wrapped copy on chain B.
And those get hacked constantly.
Constantly. General message passing doesn't just move tokens, it securely transmits data and logic. A smart contract on a private bank chain can execute a function that automatically triggers a settlement on the XRPL, which then messages a CBDC network to release funds. Developers can execute logic across more than 55 connected blockchains directly from the XRPL.
It effectively acts as the supreme switchboard for the global economy. The sources use a phrase here that I think perfectly contextualizes the landscape, the constellation of assets. They list various utility networks, Stellar, XDC network, Hedera, Quant.
In the retail ecosystem, there is a constant tribal debate over which of these networks is going to, kill the others. It is viewed as a zero-sum game.
Right, the whole Ethereum killer narrative.
Which demonstrates a profound misunderstanding of institutional architecture. These networks are not mortal competitors. They are highly specialized components orbiting the core settlement layer.
Orbiting the XRPL.
Right. Quant, for instance, focuses heavily on providing the Overledger API framework to connect legacy banking mainframes to DLTs. XDC is highly optimized for digitizing trade finance documents like bills of lading.
But when those specialized networks actually need to move the underlying monetary value instantly across borders,
They route through the Supreme Administrator. The XRPL acts as the core authorization bridge, dictating the final logic and settling the ultimate value across the entire constellation.
okay, we have systematically covered the mechanical obsolescence of SWIFT. We have dissected the first principles engineering of the XRPL, the native AM, and the cross-chain routing.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have mapped out the ruthless regulatory capture through the Clarity Act. And we have traced the actual API calls of institutional pilots like ONDO and JP Morgan. We have laid out the entire macro architecture. Now, we have to confront the most controversial element of this entire
There's
discussion.
mathematics of extreme valuation.
Yes, because if you understand the architecture, you eventually arrive at the necessary token price of XRP, and the numbers absolutely break people's brains. You might be listening to this and thinking, okay, the tech is brilliant, but an XRP token pricing at $10,000 is a mathematical hallucination.
Right, the market cap argument.
Exactly. If you multiply $10,000 by a circulating supply of 50 billion tokens, the market cap would be $500 trillion. That exceeds the GDP of the entire planet. I really need you to rigorously defend this math because on the surface, it sounds absurd.
The math sounds absurd because the retail market is applying an entirely incorrect analytical framework. They are looking at a utility commodity and trying to measure it with an equity yardstick. Market capitalization is a metric explicitly designed to measure the total equity valuation of a centralized corporate entity based on projected future cash flows and earnings.
It measures the value of a company like Apple or Microsoft.
Precisely. But XRP is not corporate stock. Ripple, the company, has equity. XRP, the token, does not. XRP is the physical cryptographic plumbing of a closed-loop global financial system.
Okay, so it's infrastructure.
Right. Applying the concept of market cap to a highly liquid bridge asset is structurally flawed. It's like trying to measure the total volume of water in the Pacific Ocean by using a thermometer. It is simply the wrong tool for the physics of the asset.
Okay, if market cap is the wrong mental model, how do we correctly calculate the necessary valuation of a bridge asset? What is the right metric?
We have to analyze utility density and the mathematics of frictionless flow. To do that, we look at the actual throughput of the global economy.
Let's run the numbers.
The legacy financial system currently processes roughly $7 trillion in foreign exchange volume every single day. Furthermore, the Bank for International Settlements estimates there is over $800 trillion in outstanding global derivatives.
The volume is almost incomprehensible.
It is. Now let's apply the mechanics of the XRPL to that volume. Imagine a major global bank needs to execute a $1 billion cross-border payment instantly using the ledger. They initiate the path-finding algorithm. If the price of XRP is currently sitting at, say, $1, that single $1 billion transaction requires the instantaneous purchase and bridging of 1 billion individual XRP tokens.
I see the bottleneck immediately. If a single entity tries to market buy 1 billion tokens in 3 seconds, they will completely obliterate the local order books.
It would be mathematically catastrophic. The bank might initiate the buy at $1, but by the time the AMM and the order book fill a billion token order, they have consumed all available liquidity. The massive slippage means the final tokens might cost them $5, $10, or $20 each.
Oh, wow.
And the entire economic advantage of using the ledger, the low fees, and the capital efficiency is completely destroyed by the friction of acquiring the asset. The utility of the network breaks.
So the system literally cannot process institutional volume if the bridge asset is cheap.
Exactly. But let's run the exact same $1 billion transfer under a different mathematical reality. If XRP is structurally valued at $10,000 per token, that exact same $1 billion payment requires the bridging of only 100,000 tokens.
And a global institutional order book can absorb a buy order of 100,000 tokens instantaneously without the price moving a fraction of percent.
Zero friction, zero price slippage, complete cost predictability. A high token valuation is not a speculative reward for retail holders hoping to get rich. It is a strict, undeniable engineering necessity.
That makes perfect sense when you frame it around slippage.
The physical architecture of the ledger literally cannot function at the scale of global commercial banking unless the bridge asset possesses extreme value density.
But this introduces a massive usability problem. If one XRP token is engineered to cost $10,000 to facilitate macroeconomic flow, how does the ledger remain useful for anything else? The original vision included micropayments. How does an individual buy a coffee or a smart contract pay a microscopic API fee if the base asset costs more than a used car?
The cryptographers anticipated the necessity of macrodensity, and they solved the micro-utility problem through the engineering principle of fractional divisibility. An XRP token is not a solid, indivisible block. Every single XRP is programmed to be divisible into 1 million smaller discrete units, which the protocol defines as drops.
Drops. Okay, let's run the math on the drops. If the network achieves the necessary institutional density and XRP reaches $10,000.
Then you divide $10,000 by 1 million. At that exact valuation, a single drop equals exactly 1 US cent, $0.01.
Wow. So the system was mathematically architected from the very first line of code to simultaneously handle the transfer of $1 billion using a handful of dense tokens, while allowing retail users to buy a coffee using a few hundred drops.
It is beautifully elegant, and this structural math drives what the sources identify as the reflexivity loop.
Break down the reflexivity loop, because this is where the supply dynamics meet the institutional demand.
The total supply is immutably locked at 100 billion tokens. Roughly 55 billion of those tokens were placed into a cryptographic escrow system. They are released methodically on a smart contract schedule.
Why lock the majority of the supply in escrow? Why not just release it all at once?
To provide continuous, highly structured liquidity to global central banks and Tier 1 institutions as they transition onto the network, you cannot onboard a central bank and then tell them to source their liquidity from volatile retail exchanges.
Right, that would be insane.
The escrow provides institutional stability.
So the supply is mathematically hard-capped, but the demand side is scaling to absorb the operational volume of the entire legacy financial system.
And the reflexivity loop accelerates the process. As the first major banking consortiums fully integrate RLUSD and the XRPL, they instantly shed the billions of dollars in dead capital previously trapped in Nostro-Vostro accounts.
Freeing up all that money.
Right. Their balance sheets become exponentially more efficient, allowing them to offer tighter spreads and faster clearing to their corporate clients.
Which means any competing bank that refuses to adopt the XRPL infrastructure will simply be priced out of the global market. They will bleed corporate clients because their legacy SWIFT transfers are too slow and too expensive.
Precisely. They're mathematically forced to adopt the exact same infrastructure just to survive. As the migration scales, the quadrillions of dollars moving through the legacy system systematically drain into the XRPL. The fixed, immutable supply of 100 billion tokens will be overwhelmingly saturated by daily, multi-trillion-dollar institutional throughput.
So let's pull all of this together. We began this deep dive searching for the silent infrastructural shift beneath the noise of the financial markets.
Yeah.
We found that the 1970s plumbing of correspondent banking is crumbling under the weight of trapped capital and settlement delays. We examined how legacy crypto fundamentally failed to provide the deterministic finality and ESG compliance required to actually replace it.
And we traced how XRP engineered a true 0-to-1 institutional monopoly. They basically ignored the retail noise. They built first principles technology that utilizes federated consensus to settle in 3 seconds for fractions of a cent.
Right.
They meticulously constructed an impenetrable regulatory moat through global licensing and the surgical wording of the Clarity Act.
And most importantly, we broke down the mathematics of utility density. The realization that extreme asset valuation is not a speculative dream, but a mandatory protocol requirement to facilitate the frictionless flow of global capital without catastrophic slippage.
If you understand the physical architecture of the plumbing, the regulatory mandates, and the mathematical limits of liquidity, you understand precisely where the capital of the 21st century must inevitably flow.
Which brings us to a final, profound concept buried in the sources. When David Schwartz and the founding cryptographers architected the XRPL, They were not building a software startup intended for a 5-year venture capital exit.
No, their vision was much larger.
They explicitly engineered the protocol with a 100-plus year infrastructural horizon.
They built a century-long operating system for global value. They protected its integrity with the negative UNL, a system that dynamically allows the network to bypass offline or malicious validators, ensuring the ledger continues to operate flawlessly even under a coordinated state-level or corporate attack.
But the most vital piece of 100-year engineering is the deflationary mechanism.
Yes, the XRPL is mathematically deflationary. To protect the network against spam and malicious ledger bloat, every single transaction requires a minuscule computational fee. But that fee is not paid out to validators.
It's burned.
It is mathematically permanently destroyed. It is burned out of existence.
With every single transaction, the total global supply of 100 billion tokens gets microscopically smaller.
So consider the trajectory we have mapped out today. As apex global institutions, sovereign central banks, and quadrillions of dollars in tokenized real-world assets fully migrate to this deterministic ledger, the network will process billions of transactions daily.
Which means the burn rate will accelerate exponentially. I want you to sit with this final thought. As the global economy inevitably transitions onto this frictionless bridge, what happens to the balance of power, the mathematics of value density, and the fundamental structure of global wealth, when the single agnostic asset facilitating all the world's commerce is slowly, permanently, and mathematically shrinking in supply every single second for the next century?
We are watching the foundation of the future being poured in real time.
Keep your eyes open.